All right, so hi everybody, and welcome to our TA panel discussion of the topics of this week. And maybe I can kind of give a little context or summary. So till now we kind of explored basically the basics of sound. Understand now that a lot of music traditions actually chose tones and notes. So this would be like periodic sounds that have definite pitch, rhythm, and that's kind of the music notation way of addressing representation of sounds. And we also started composing, and we also talked about technology and the progress of technology in general that also changes our culture, changes the music. And of course, it opens up the palette or the scope of sounds to almost any kind of sound. With the soundscape compositions, I think we started addressing the question of how do you basically express yourself or organize yourself in an artistic way and meaningful way where you can have any kind of sound at your disposal. And so the question I think that comes up is really, what is the meaning, right? What is the meaning of these complex sounds? How do we relate to them emotionally? Express, what is the experience, the expression? So to deal with this, we brought up some questions of psychoacoustics, really perception of sounds. Maybe sounds are more pleasant and less pleasant. There's even the notion of what constitutes a sound object, right? So maybe a note, right? A tone that somebody, an instrument plays on a specific, presses a key and holds it for a duration could be viewed as an individual object. But if you go out there and record some sound effect or some natural sound, where does it begin? Where does it end? And what are the parameters? How do we perceive it? So we dealt with, the idea of noise, but now we basically have some kind of a continuum. And the continuum goes also into the question of how many sound objects or how many sounds there are. So I think the questions that composers and researchers deal with have to do with these notions of perception of sounds and perceptions of complex sounds. So the term timbre or sound color is something that a lot of researchers look at and composers, because if you think about the complexity of a sound and if you perceive it as a whole, then what language can we use to describe that? So I think the topic of our discussion today would be really kind of the auditory, the perceptual, the cognitive, but eventually what is the meaning of sounds if you think about the sound in the most open and abstract way. So I would kind of like to from us, where does the study of psychoacoustics, perception, cognition, and maybe even like larger form narrative comes into your work, into your research, into your creative practice, and how does it basically help you to understand or render or give meaning to music? So yeah, let's hear. Let's go. Gabriel, maybe? Yeah, I'll just.
Sure. One of the things that I think about because of my research in 3D audio with regards to this stuff is like the way that certain sine tones, when added together, could become like part of a harmonic series, or the way that they're spaced out over time could create some fusion or separation of sound sources. This can be like expanded compositionally in multi-channel audio compositions, and to think about like the context and time and space of these different sounds and how they become a congruent image and part of a larger compositional phrase, or if they're independent streams at different points. And so that's something that I find interesting to try to think about. Like one of the ways that in the software that I use and like the composers that that I listen to, they play around with this is they'll take a source signal and they'll split up the frequency spectrum, and then you can like move the different parts of the frequency spectrum independently or create multiple copies of them. So I find that's kind of a new parameter of sound decomposition that can be played with, and people without loudspeakers do this too. Like it's been done for a long time with violins and oboes and trombones and all that stuff to have people placed in different parts of a concert hall and play streams that are supposed to be listened to in harmony or not in harmony. It's a technique that's been explored for now hundreds of years. So yeah, that's from my perspective what I find interesting about this conversation.
Yeah, so brought up some interesting questions. First of all, the idea of stream segregation, or the idea that a complex sound object might be multiple sound events, and the question is, do you perceive them as one whole? And the parallel to orchestration, really, right? I mean, if classical composer had this wonderful instrument, which is tens of people playing, right? And then he studied how to combine them in different sound colors. So really, this kind of parallel, this approach to composition that into sound color of a complex object, like an orchestration question, has its kind of equivalent with electroacoustic music or any kind of blended instrumental and electronic music.
Right.
Thank you.
There's another associated technique with granular synthesis, which is this, as we know, like this synthesis process where a sound is decomposed into multiple little grains, and a grain is like a couple milliseconds of that sound. But then being able to put all those grains separately in space or bring them closer together creates this like new paradigm of electroacoustic composition, this new dimension of
Oh yeah, and so the spatial dimension, right? How it moves around you, where it's coming from. That also helps the segregation. And yeah, thank you. Stella, would you like?
Yeah, sure. So the question was the meaning of sound, and so when I got this question, I think it depends. First, it will depends on the research purpose. So, for example, in music information retrieval area, the definition of MIR is we can organize some information in music based on our query. So, if I'm interested in music emotion recognition or some music genre classification, that I wanna extract some information in music which is related to emotion or genre, and yeah, that's related to one of my research topic. So for my case, if I want to understand some emotional information in music, then I need to understand some timbre information or just really high level metadata such as male, female singer, or which kind of instrument used in the music. So in the case, if I can get those information, then I can combine those all for understanding emotion or genre information based on those metadata information. So we cover some definition of noise in the lecture, and then for understanding noise, we need to understand not just one component from the sound, but also we need to understand several different components, which is also one of them is also timbre. So that's why I feel interested that if we can understand some timbre information in music or sound, then we can do interesting things a lot, such as I mentioned, we can understand some emotional context in the music, or sometimes we can use those for mood or genre classification, because those research area is really active because we, for example, we listen Spotify or Pandora music, then they did a lot of recommendation tasks based on those information. So the meaning of sound for me is understanding or organizing some information in music and audio, and then how I can massage those information for my research purpose. So, and yeah, to summarize, recently I focused on understanding timbre or some music representation for better understanding emotional context in music.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, a lot of us, I think, almost intuitively can say, well, the meaning of music is how it makes us feel, right? The mood, the emotion. And I'm not sure that every composer immediately is aware of the emotion that the audience will be like inducing these emotions to the audience. But I think for us, it definitely gives us some kind of a bodily response, which also has an emotional response. Just as a little of a follow-up question, so the question going from timbre, like notes, timbre, which is the color of the sound, maybe texture. So in your research, what are the units of sound? I mean, how long are, what is the sound? Is it like a millisecond, 10 milliseconds, a second, 10 seconds?
So
does it change the perception? I mean, what is kind of the time scale of these emotions?
Yeah, definitely. So first, I searched like some open source music database for doing this kind of music emotion recognition task, and their total length of one file was 45 seconds. So my first trial was just getting every information from 45 seconds and try to understand some kind of timbre difference and emotional context in the music. And music has dynamic even it's in 45 seconds, there are like multiple dynamics in 45 seconds. So I divided it into 5 seconds. In the case, I can get meaningful information in every 5 seconds, but I also want to try to see like 500 milliseconds as well, because I thought that based on the previous research, that's relevant time length for understanding some information in music. So yeah, I made some kind of very try like different setting, like 500 millisecond, like 1 second, 5 second. I think 45 second is not relevant information in this case, but usually I can say 500 millisecond to 5 second is relevant time length for my research understanding. And it also depending on the genre of music. Like for example, classical music, like it didn't have much dynamic than pop song or other genre. So I think like deciding the length of the like processing time, I think it will depend on the genre or some previous research. But yeah, going back to your question, I think 500 millisecond to 5 second is relevant for me.
Yeah, so definitely we see that there are different time scales, right? Different time scales of music. And also when Gabriel mentioned granular synthesis, that's on in the tens of milliseconds, right? You cut it in very short frames. And then, as you start considering our emotional responses, they start engaging different aspects. So, and as you said, like in 45 seconds of music, there's a lot of things happening. So maybe even our emotions go through some kind of roller coaster. So it's not one emotion. Yeah, would you like to share some of your thoughts or your research, and also the fusion of what is the sound source stuff?
Yeah, so like I think about like when I think about like sound, and basically like what to me is like when I think about music, so what kind of things music property can be analyzed in a field of the sound, meaning like the spectral ground, tone line, and something like that. So like I'm thinking about something is called the pitch melody extraction, because when I do this kind of thing, this kind of problem, it's a problem like you hear the sound and you want to extract its melody or singing melody from this kind of sound. So when we talk about the melody or main melody, what we talk about the pitch is like the tone is like is combined by two parts. The first part is the music octave, and the second part is the music pitch class. And the music octave and music pitch class are actually the two music properties related to the spectral ground. One is the spectral ground is the fundamental frequency of the spectral ground, which is the most magnitude of frequency beings it lies in is about like the frequency of is the music pitch class. And the second one is the music octave, is about like some harmonics we have in the music spectrum. So we just take, but in all kinds of like previous works that they will just directly predict the melody in one way, is that just regardless of the pitch and octave and mid-pitch class. But actually, if we can decompose these kind of things to be the one music note into two parts, the pitch class like it has and the octave it belongs to, actually it will make the task easier. We mix one task to be two easier tasks, and then we address it. And it turns out to be that if we analyze in the spectrum, what we analyze in the frequency beings in the spectrograms definitely help us to make the contribution into the performance of the melodic expression. And what I think about the meaning of the music and the sound is that when we are analyzed by the combination between the machine learning and the signal processing, actually we found some kinds of basic fundamental theory in the signal processing definitely help us to explore further in the machine learning space. And it will just reduce the complexity and difficulty of our addressing to these kind of problems. So that's what I think about the sound, what the sound means.
Yeah, so you focused or you addressed specifically the question of separating the pitch in musical notes from other harmonic information that is appearing through the harmonics in and you can see this using the spectrogram or the frequency analysis, right?
Yes.
So so these are all technical terms, but I think everybody now sufficiently from concept. So I think everybody should be able kind of to relate to the materials we studied in class. Thank you. And Jingwei, would you like to kind of also address the question of meaning of sound or psychoacoustics, psychology, cognitive science, or perception or composition?
Yeah, sure. So for this class, we talk about the noise. So from my perspective, I think the noise is most like the things you don't understand or things you don't want to understand. You don't want to internalize. For example, if it's playing the music outside, but you're studying in your room, you don't want to hear the music, then the music becomes the noise for you. So the noise is basically based on your mindset, and this is one perspective. And another thing is about the dissonance and the consonance. So traditionally, we think about the consonants as they have the bass note and have the harmonics. But if we introduce the timbre, because the upper harmonics of the timbre are not well aligned, so sometimes like introduced in the chorus, that 2.1 ratio will sound consonant, but the 2.2 to 1 ratio will sound dissonant. So the tuning and the definition of consonance and dissonance depends on the timbre. So how do we deal with that thing? I think that would be an interesting problem. So yeah, and I also read the reference to this material that's about the tuning system. I think it's quite interesting. So yeah, I'm still exploring that thing.
Yeah, so I think it brought up a very interesting question, which sort of almost goes to music. What makes music is the intent of the listener, of the musician, right? It's the human intent in the sound, which means that we actually, by listening, we define what we want to listen to. So as you said, noise is anything you don't want to listen to. It's actually a very interesting question, because I think that also might have been an experience that some of the students had when when they started listening not only to this kind of experimental music that some might feel is kind of academic or very experimental, but even listening to music of other cultures, and of course alternative tuning systems like the Bow and Pierce scale, but also tuning of gamelan and stuff like that. For some of us it doesn't make sense, right? Because we're not accustomed. So there was this entrainment process is linked to the cultural conventions and to the way our brain actually how to make sense of music. So I think this is a very important question that, we, even though that, we might be just consumers many times of music, right? It's playing on cell phone or on Spotify, and somebody recommended a list, and usually, recommendations are very much related, but you must understand that you also are used by listening to some examples to all the structures, all the regularities, temporal, conventions, scales, and timbres. And once you go outside of your comfort zone, it may be very meaningful music, but not to you. And then you consider this as noise. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about it from the perspective of niche construction, like the free energy. You think about the perception action cycle, and what you perceive is actually filtered by your mind. So you only absorb the information that is, I would say, adapt to your own mind of structure, but not other information. So there is actually a filter for you to accept information. So you only see the things you want to see. That's what we are talking about, and you only hear the things as music that you think is music, and you think other things are noise. So this is from the perceptual perspective. Like, so if you want to change the noise to the music, you have to change what other people's think about that, and their perspective, and their maybe habits, their culture, these kind of things.
Thank you. So I think it was wonderful, super interesting, and kind of very deep and amazing kind of variety of aspects of sound that I think we touched upon them. So I think we had a good chance to hear how really understanding of the sound itself, and understanding of how we perceive sound, and being aware, self-aware also of our attitude to sound is really part of making music and understanding music. And
I kind of want to add something to what Jinwei said, which was, I feel that when we listen to contemporary music and experimental music, a lot of times the lens through which we listen to it, if there's program notes or if there's some sort of explanation as to the origin, the meaning behind it, we gain a different kind of appreciation for it. And so it's the same sound, which is interesting, but the way that you listen to it and the actual effect that it has on your brain, because you've been sort of primed when you listen to it, at least for me, it's the result is different.
Great, thank you. So I mean, I hope we help our contribution is also opening up or unpriming or priming in a different way our students to really explore the meaning of sound for a very open-ended and critical but also experimental ways. So thank you very much, and and we'll continue instructing you in the coming weeks, and we'll meet again and discuss the next topic probably in 2 weeks. But thank you, everyone. Okay, and good luck to the students with assignments and the projects. Okay, bye-bye.